We have a great segment just ahead that should really concern everybody listening to this right now. We're talking cybersecurity right now. Kelly Hammonds is my guest. He's the CEO and founder of Secutor. Welcome to the Jeff Crilley Show.
Thank you, Jeff.
And you brought with you a couple of colleagues. Tell me about who you brought.
Okay. Well, we've got Scott and we've got JP. Individually, they are top-notch in their areas of cybersecurity, best-of-breed experts.
Outstanding. Tell me more about Secutor.
Okay. Well, so I started building Secutor 4 years ago to fill three needs that I saw in the cybersecurity space. Number one, it's too expensive. Number two, except for there aren't enough high quality experts in the field. And number three, except for the few that are really good at self-promotion, those experts aren't really paid what they're worth. Mm. So I put together a business structure that can solve all three of those problems. I've witnessed firsthand how companies with great products still fail because they squander their greatest resource, and that's their people.
Yes.
So I wanted to build a company that turned that around, a company that was built on honesty, integrity, and transparency and respect.
Absolutely. Well done, because your company has really grown.
Okay.
It just started with you 4 years ago. How many people do you have now?
Well, we're up to 32 consultants now.
That's amazing.
With an average in industry of 21 years.
That is amazing. Well, let's bring in JP Hill right now.
Good morning, Jeff.
Thanks for being on my show.
Thank you.
We hear cybersecurity almost every day on the news. I know that one of the biggest problems is people will not change their password, or they'll have one password across all platforms. That's a big problem, isn't it?
Yes. It's a big problem because once that password is exposed, you have the keys to the kingdom. So every possible facet of your life, you've now exposed to everyone. And if I have your password to get into Facebook, I can get into your Twitter, I can get into everything that you own. And 9 times out of 10, if they use that one password, their banking information is connected to that.
Wow. And tell me if I've got this right. The bad guys have programs that they can run that will search every word in the English language in a nanosecond.
Yes, that's called a dictionary attack. And for the most part, the bad guys are smarter than us because they don't play with rules. So they're able to do a lot more things than we can to try to protect against that.
And so password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's not good.
Not really. Not really.
All right, let's bring in Scott Geyer. Welcome back. You're a returning guest.
Thanks for having me back, Jeff.
Yeah. So since we talked last, Scott, has it gotten more challenging for you? I mean, are the bad guys winning?
I'd say one thing that we talked about when I was here last year was just the availability of the tools that have kind of driven down the skill level necessary to do that. But in this last year, what we've seen is these tools that were created by the NSA and the CIA have started to get leaked. So now the attackers have, access to really high-grade tools. So, we've seen that drive some of the pretty major attacks in 2017.
But it seems like everybody has been attacked and is vulnerable. I mean, banks, it doesn't really matter. The U.S. government, how is it that they it seems like we're not staying one step ahead of the bad guys?
Well, it's only because we're not staying one step ahead. Basically, what you have in most industries, you have compliance, which is a baseline and just a small segment of security. So for the most part, people try to achieve whatever compliance model that they have to do for their industry. So if you're trying to do the bare minimum to pass compliance, you're really not doing the best that you can do in terms of security.
Right. Well, so I noticed, even on my new iPhone, it's facial recognition now. Is facial recognition like a tougher password than something else? I mean, is that going to be omnipresent in the future?
It's all nice until someone figures out how to defeat it or circumvent it.
So like 3D print a copy of your face and put it in front of the camera?
And they could do that?
Oh, yes. There have been studies to show that that's already been used to defeat facial recognition.
Wow.
You're really looking at having multi-factor authentication. You don't want to rely on one authentication mechanism because pretty much any of them can fail in some manner. So you use a combination of them most effective is having, an actual secure token that you have to carry around with you.
And if you watched movies before, you remember how they used to cut people's fingers off so they could place it on.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And that's because that's what people were using to actually defeat the fingerprint scanners and the hand scanners.
So when you say by multifaceted protection, you're talking about facial recognition to get through the first hurdle, and then maybe a key code for the second, and then a password for the third.
Correct.
So ideally, that would be the best situation. So the something you have, something you know, right?
Yes.
Something you are.
And something that you are, right? So in the case of the telephone, iPhone X or the Android that has facial recognition, that could be one factor.
Yeah.
Second factor would then be your PIN code. And the combination of those two things would make it secure. Problem is that's not convenient.
Right.
People want the speed and the convenience of looking at their phone and immediately being in. Now, for the vast majority of people, that's enough. That's secure enough, just having the one factor. But proper security, you would need at least two.
Tell me about the kinds of companies you guys like to work with.
Well, we kind of like to work with everybody. I try to stay away from healthcare for the most part because of the HIPAA regulations. People have a tendency to not understand that HIPAA is really referring to the protection of the data or the personal health information. That's what HIPAA compliance is mostly surrounded by. So once again, let's go back to what we talked about earlier with compliance. People try to achieve compliance and not necessarily security. So when once they achieve a certain level of HIPAA compliance, they don't care about security anymore. I've done what I'm supposed to do for the most part.
The bare minimum.
Right. So across, you guys work with the banking industry, pharmaceuticals. I mean, kind of soup to nuts.
Yes.
And what's it like to engage you guys when you guys come in for the first time? Are you meeting with their CEO or their CIO, or how does that work?
Well, it depends on the company, right? How large they are and what their needs are, who is most concerned about security. Sometimes it's the CEO. It may be the chief financial officer, the CFO. If they're large enough to have a CIO, chief information officer, then we'd be speaking with them. And whenever we first get engaged, it's discovery mode. Find out what they really need, which isn't necessarily what they think they need, and help them figure that out, scope out whatever needs to be done, and then help them accomplish that.
Why don't you tell me a recent success story? You don't have to name the company, but describe a typical engagement for you guys.
Oh wow, a typical engagement. That's tough, right? Because they're like fingerprints. Every company's different. Every company's needs are different. One that I can talk about that we did recently, without trying to run over our time limit, is vulnerability management. So a company, a brand new CISO, had just joined the company, and they had very little visibility into what was actually in the network. And so we went in and did a full analysis of their network, looked at every router, at every firewall, figured out what was actually in the network, and then built a policy around that and started scanning it for vulnerabilities and automated that and built it out so that she could get the right information to the right people to start fixing those problems.
How do you protect against, I know there are these phishing emails or spam emails or malware emails, so employee opens up an email at work that he or she shouldn't open up. Can it infect the whole system?
Yes, depending on the type of malware. It can, you have what's known as lateral spread, and that's basically the malware traveling east to west or west to east of the network. In some cases, there's malware out there that's self-propelling, and wherever it sees a path that it can continue its travels, it will go that way for it.
So, Scott, what's the solution there?
So, there are some tools that can scan kind of the emails coming inbound and kind of do a kind of sandboxed analysis is what we do. It kind of opens up the attachments in a kind of virtual environment, tries to detect whether that attachment is malicious or not. Now, there are some ways to bypass that. Sometimes the malware can detect that it's in a sandbox and not do anything malicious. So there's various ways you can get around that. But once you get past that, you look at the endpoint protection. Traditional antivirus is no longer really effective. It's just looking at a signature, trying to detect viruses based on a signature that's been seen before. But most malware we see now is unique every time we see it. So there's more of like an artificial intelligence, machine learning type analysis that will detect those kind of new threats. We sell some of those products. Cylance, Carbon Black, Bit9, there are a couple of examples of those. We're seeing more and more of the vendors there. But then there's also some tools that can kind of monitor, if you're a large enough environment, you have a big enough budget, that can kind of monitor your whole environment and see when new processes spin up on machines and kind of detect that whole process of coming in, see who opened the email, see that it triggered some malware type activity and see that across your environment and then go in and remediate it. But, your kind of tools kind of depend on your budget and expertise.
What keeps you guys up at night?
Everything.
Well, the hackers or the bad guys are always one step ahead of us.
Yeah.
So they're not limited by making sure that they do the right thing. We have to be right 100% of the time. They only have to be right once.
Yep.
Well, they say that the next world war is going to be fought in cyberspace, and it occurred to me that you don't have to put a plane into a building to cause a panic anymore. If you took down all the ATMs or you took out the power grid,
And see, the scariest part is what the public knows is what's broadcast on the news, because each one of us is in information security. We get to see papers and notes and just updates from all across the world, from all across different agencies, and they tell us multiple things that are happening that the public may not be interested in.
Wow.
So what you get is like the sensationalized attacks, while we get to see everything, and that's what keeps you up at night.
All right, Kelly, we're going to give you the final word and a chance to plug the website.
Okay.
What do you want to leave people with?
All right. So, whenever you break it down, Secutor is a pretty simple business model, and it's the same one that my dad and my grandpa taught me. They have a mechanic shop, Hammond's Garage, that's been in Fort Worth for, almost 60 years now. We put our people ahead of profits and enable them to do what's right for the customer, even if it's not what's best for the company in the short term. Our website is secutoris.com. That's secutoris.com.
Outstanding. Thank you, gentlemen. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Coming up next, an amazing nonprofit that is going to truly touch your heart. That's next up on the Jeff Crilley Show.